Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our third Cooking with Professors. This time it's Baking with Professor Murphy. And today we're making jalapeno cheddar biscuits. I'm very excited for this. I've been looking forward to this all semester long. And Professor Murphy, I'm going to let you take it over now.
All right, howdy everybody. We were joking a few minutes before the Zoom call started that maybe this should be called Burning Stuff with Professors, because who knows what's actually going to happen. And I've just got to say that cooking on Zoom is way more stressful than teaching on Zoom. Not least of which is I'm actually in front of a live studio audience here. My family is all sitting here at the dining room table, hoping to see me crash and burn. So let's see if we can make some biscuits without any disasters happening. Is everybody ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this thing. First off, go ahead and set your hot box to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. So that can be warming up. All right, that's good and going. Let's go over the ingredients list. Now, I sent out the ingredients list to Allison, I don't know, 10 days ago or something, and I had cut the ingredients in half from the recipe that we normally use using an online recipe converter. And the amounts are a little bit off. It doesn't matter. These are drop biscuits, so very, very forgiving. Difficult to screw them up, but the ingredients are going to be a slightly different measures than what I had sent to Allison. So you may want to adjust on the fly, or if you just use what you've got, then it will be okay. And it looks like Harrison is pasting the link to the printed recipe on Google Docs into the chat, so you can follow along there and check out the ingredients as well. Okay, so let's just meet the ingredients. We're starting with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now, baking is kind of my thing. I like to cook, but my wife is a better cook than I am, so she does most of the cooking these days. I do the baking. For baking, you really need to have a scale to weigh your flour. But again, these are pretty forgiving biscuits, and I figured most of you probably don't have a kitchen scale yet. So roughly 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Your 2 cups might be different than mine. It's okay. 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And I think in the recipe I sent around before, I said 2 tablespoons. So this is a little bit, a little bit more baking powder than I said, but that's okay. If you got the 2 tablespoons, that'll work too. Half a teaspoon of plain old table salt, not kosher salt or anything special there. I've got 1 stick of salted butter, which I have already cut up into roughly 1/4-inch cubes. If you slice it into 1/4-inch slices, that will work just as well. I have 2½ ounces of sharp cheddar cheese. I have 2 jalapenos, which I have stemmed and seeded and cut out most of the membranes because my kids are going to be eating these biscuits, and the more the membrane you leave in, the spicier they will be. I've got 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. 3/4 of a cup plus 1 tablespoon. That was one of the measures that was a little bit off, so I had to add a little bit more buttermilk. So it's 3/4 of a cup plus a tablespoon. I also have some black pepper because I like a spicy biscuit, and in addition to the jalapenos, I'm going to grind up some black pepper into mine. I've also got a little bit of butter reserve. So in addition to the 1 stick of cubed butter, I've got a little bit that I'm going to melt and brush onto the biscuits at the end. That's purely optional. Makes them taste a little bit richer, but they taste just fine without that. Any questions so far, or are we ready to start mixing stuff up?
My question is, if we were to measure the flour, how much would that be? How many?
About 2 cups.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2 cups. No, I didn't actually weigh it since I wasn't going to do weight, so I'm not sure. And hey, for this recipe, it's fine. It's going to work. 2 cups, more or less. Your 2 cups different than mine, still going to be good. We can just add a little bit more buttermilk or a little bit more flour if we need to once we get into the mixing stage. Yeah. Okay, so these biscuits, they come together really quickly. They're drop biscuits, so they're not rolled and cut biscuits. Rolled and cut biscuits are actually pretty difficult to get right. It takes a lot of practice. These biscuits are very difficult to mess up. They are delicious, and they are a crowd pleaser. And you can go from not having anything even started to having these completely done in less than 30 minutes. So very nice to have in your repertoire, especially if you've got some unexpected guests dropping by. Everybody ready to get started? Just give me a thumbs up. Make sure people can hear me. Okay, very good. So we didn't talk about tools that you're going to need. You don't need much. You can make these in a food processor by combining the dry ingredients and then pulsing the butter about 10, 15 times until it comes together, and then putting it back into a bowl and adding the buttermilk. We're just going to use our hands. If you didn't want to use your hands to mix the stuff up, you could use a pastry blender instead, or just a couple of forks, but we're just going to use the tools that God gave us today. I also have this is a 1/8 of a cup scoop for measuring out the biscuits when we drop them onto the cookie sheet at the end. I've just got a mixing implement in case my hands get too sticky. I've got a brush, pastry brush for the end to brush them with butter when they come out of the oven. And then I have a standard half sheet baking sheet with some parchment paper. The parchment paper is purely optional, but it saves one dish that you have to clean up later. The biscuits really aren't going to stick that much, but parchment paper makes sure they aren't going to. Okay, so those are our tools. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing, we're going to take our flour and dump it into the bowl, along with the baking powder and the salt. And we're just going to give that a good stir with our fingers. I washed my hands yesterday. It's okay. Give it a good stir there. And easy.
How often do you recommend washing your hands?
The washing the hands is optional, right? I mean, we're among friends here. Okay, you got your dry ingredients mix. It's time to bring the butter to the party. So we're going to just dump all the butter in. And this is going to be the longest part of the preparation process. If we were doing this in the food processor, we'd be done in about, I don't know, 30 seconds. But what we're going to do is we are going to relatively gently rub the bits of butter between our floury fingers and just kind of smush them out a little bit at a time to get that butter and flour nicely incorporated. And it doesn't have to be completely mixed in. What we're looking for here is something that looks more or less like play sand, kind of sand that you have in a kid's sandbox, but a little bit, that had some water added to it. So a little bit clumpier than that, but just keep on smushing the butter between your fingers with the flour until the butter has pretty much disappeared into the flour and there are no big chunks of butter left. This is very therapeutic. This is the part you should enjoy. It's a nice little massage for your hands, getting that butter and flour all incorporated. This is the part that goes on for a while. If you're watching this later on video, you can fast forward if you're using a food processor or a pastry blender, because you're probably already done with the incorporating the butter. But for those of us who believe in slow food, we're doing it the old slow way.
So how did you discover this recipe? Did you say that it was your wife that found it, or?
Okay, so now here's an interesting part about our relationship. She's a better cook than I am, but I'm a better recipe finder than she is. So I find recipes, and sometimes I'll try them myself first, and sometimes I'll just say, this sounds interesting, why don't we try this? And then she'll take it and hit it out of the ballpark. I actually made these first. The genesis of this recipe is a Pioneer Woman recipe. And those of you who have looked at any of her recipes, you know that she's not big on using a scale. She just uses measuring cups. So I don't have weights here. So that's where I started out with the recipe. She does not use jalapenos in hers. I do. I like a little spicier biscuit. And she also just uses the food processor for the entire thing, including the buttermilk, which I disapprove of because that makes a rather thicker biscuit instead of a fluffy biscuit. This technique of mashing out the butter, I actually learned from watching Alton Brown make biscuits. And this is the technique he learned from his grandmother. And I've got to say, if you're making rolled biscuits, the Alton Brown recipe is the best one that I've ever had. And I'm not very good at making it, but my son and my wife excel at it, especially my wife. She can make a light, fluffy biscuit using that recipe. It'll just knock your socks off. But it's hard. It's difficult. It took a lot of practice before she got to that point. So this is easier. Are you on camera there? Can people see you? She's actually on the Zoom call, and they're over there at the table chuckling at the nonsensical things that I say as I massage my flour into my butter. She knows it's true. She's a better cook than I am now. But if you want fancy pastries, if you want pies, if you want eclairs, hey, I'm your man. If you want something frankly that you could actually live on, then she's your cook. I make the fattening stuff. She makes the good stuff. Okay, how's your mixture coming along? Mine's just about done. I could have actually been going faster, but it's difficult to talk and mix my ingredients at the same time. Here's I'll hold this up to the camera. I don't know if you can see that. It's still pretty floury, but we've got most of the butter worked out into the flour. It's starting to look a little bit more like sand, maybe, yeah, very fine sand is what we've got here. I think mine is just about ready. The next step is going to be to add the cheese and the jalapenos. So if you don't have your jalapenos cut up, now is the time to go ahead and get started with that and grate your cheese. Yeah, mine's ready. Okay. Members of the audience, you tell me, do we need to have an awkward pause here while you cut up your jalapenos and grate your cheese, or are we good to go?
So I need to chop my jalapeno up still.
Okay, go for it.
And sorry, you said like dice it or mince it?
Yeah, I've got them cut into a quarter, half-inch size. It just doesn't really matter. It depends on how big you want them to come out in your biscuits. I like a pretty decent sized piece of jalapeno. And I'll tell you, if you're gonna seed them and remove the membranes, a spoon, especially a grapefruit spoon, is a great way to do that. Just cut the stem off, cut the pepper in half, scoop it out with the grapefruit spoon, chop, 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 you're done.
How often do you normally bake? Do you bake a lot, or is it one of those like special occurrences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, how often do I bake these days? The answer these days is not very often. For a couple of reasons. Yeah, holidays. So she's saying mostly on the holidays is when I do my baking. So for instance, spring break was it last Sunday? Sunday before last, it was pie day, right? And so pie is one of my specialties. And so I had to knock out a couple of pies for pie day. And I don't know, did I make anything else over spring break? Probably not. But with Easter coming up at the next week, a week from today, indeed, I'll be more involved in the prep process, and especially with the difficult stuff like eclairs that we have on for dessert after Easter dinner. Yeah. So how much do I actually bake these days? I don't know, once a month, maybe. Used to be more, less now. Okay, how are we doing on those jalapenos, folks? I can see tiny little pictures of people moving around. Ah, yeah, I see some chopped jalapenos there. Very good, very nice, very nice. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the jalapenos and the cheese to my flour mixture. And if you're inclined to add a little bit of freshly ground black pepper, this is the time that you would add that. I like a lot of pepper, and it would take me forever to grind it with this Costco grinder. So I actually have some prepared. I've got about a tablespoon of black pepper that I'm going to add to the mix. Purely optional, and for some folks that would make the biscuits too spicy, but I like a spicy biscuit. And I'm just going to mix all that stuff up with my fingers until it is well mixed and distributed throughout the flour and butter mixture. And then I'm going to make a little well in the center of the bowl. And the next step is going to be to add the buttermilk. Now, some years ago, we got into the habit of, rather than having buttermilk in the house all the time, and we go through a lot of it now, so we've always got some buttermilk, but it was easier to keep powdered buttermilk in the house because it never goes bad. Powdered buttermilk, which is actually pretty tasty. And I actually like powdered buttermilk, and I was going to try to get some for today, but couldn't find any. Powdered buttermilk, if you like the buttermilk flavor, that tangy flavor that buttermilk gives to baked goods, you can go crazy with the powdered buttermilk and add more than the box of buttermilk powder says with the same amount of liquid, and you get a much richer buttermilk taste. Now, using powdered buttermilk, your biscuit's going to be a little bit more dense. You get a better texture if you use the liquid buttermilk. I don't know why. But yeah, so if you've got powdered buttermilk, this would be the time to throw in an extra tablespoon or two just to up that buttermilk flavor quotient. But if you were using liquid buttermilk, this is a 3/4 of a cup plus 1 tablespoon, and we're just going to pour that into the well that I made in the center of the batter. And because this is going to make a sticky mess, I'm not going to use my finger. You could use a spatula, but what I've got is a bowl scraper. Just makes it easy to blend things. And we're just going to blend this in gently by rotating the bowl. I'm rotating the bowl in a clockwise fashion and just scooping the dry ingredients into the buttermilk, and just keep going around like that until I've got a good uniform mixture going here. Now, because we scooped our flour instead of weighing the flour, might be a little bit too dry, might be a little bit too wet. So it's always a good idea to have a little extra buttermilk or a little extra flour on hand in case you need to adjust the moisture in your batter to get it to the point that you can actually scoop it and make the biscuits. This is looking like it might be a little bit dry today. A little bit thick. I had to switch to my spatula.
So mine smells
okay, so,
good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is everyone else smelling pretty good?
So this is what I've got. This is a little bit drier than I want it to be. It's a little bit too crumbly. It's for these, you don't really want a crumbly kind of pie dough mixture. You want it to be more sticky so that it clumps together when you scoop it out. So I'm gonna break out the buttermilk and add that didn't happen. Add about a tablespoon. I think I'm gonna go with 2 tablespoons there. So you do the same. If your dough is super sticky, add about a tablespoon of flour, mix it up, see how it goes. If it's dry and crumbly, then maybe add a tablespoon of buttermilk or even just water. You don't need more buttermilk. And just get it mixed up there till it starts to come together. How are we all doing?
How are you mixing? Are you mixing with your hands, or what are you doing with the buttermilk?
So before I was using my bowl scraper, which is a thin piece of plastic, but the dough is a little stiff for that. So now I'm using a silicone on a wooden stick spatula, mixing paddle. I don't know what this thing is called. I don't know. Yeah, you guys can see, right? My wife asked you to see. This is the thing. The view of the bowl. Yes, they should be able to.
And if the viewers at home switch to speaker view, you can see the 3 cameras all at once.
Yes, and you can see Professor Murphy's essential professional chef setup. It's amazing. Well done.
I would like to give a shout out of thanks to my family who helped me clean up the kitchen. What you can't see is what's on the other side of the camera, which is where we had to move all the stuff off the kitchen counters so that it wouldn't be totally embarrassing to make biscuits in our cluttered up kitchen. Okay, my dough is essentially to the stage that I want it. You can see it if I hold some up here. It's pretty cohesive ball of dough now. And while it's a little bit crumbly between the major balls of dough, it's actually come together quite nicely. And it's a little bit tacky, a little bit sticky. That's about the texture that we want for this kind of biscuit. Everybody looking good? Thumbs up. Okay, good. So there is our dough. Now it's time for the cookie sheet. Again, cookie sheet with a piece of parchment paper. You don't actually need parchment paper, but that'll be one less dish for my poor kids to clean up. This is 1/8 of a cup measuring scoop. You could alternatively use an ice cream scoop, which, honey, I think is what you usually use when you make these, right? So she usually uses an ice cream scoop and just scoops it like ice cream. I think those are roughly going to be about the same, but I'm going to go with the 1/8 of a cup because you're more likely to have that wherever you are. And just set them one at a time on your cookie sheet. Try to make them as uniform as possible by packing the dough into the measuring cup.
Someone has asked, should they spray the pan first if they don't have parchment paper?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary because they don't really stick that much. And have you ever made them, dear, without using parchment paper?
Yes.
And did they stick? She's saying they didn't stick when she made them without parchment paper. There's enough butter in this dough. It shouldn't stick to anything, right? Also, I don't like the flavor that cooking spray sometimes imparts to your more delicate baked goods like these. So I would go without it.
How close together should they be? Are they going to spread?
They're going to spread a little bit. So I'm reaching capacity on my baking sheet. I might have to get another one out, except I only heated up the small oven, so I can only cook one tray at a time. Anyway, I'm going to put them about 2 inches apart all across the baking sheet. Now, you can put them closer together because the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to end up touching when they come out of the oven. That's not a problem. You just cut them apart, break them apart, and everything will be fine. Indeed, I've got some extra dough here, so I'm probably going to try that myself. And we'll see just how fine it ends up being. It's nothing like improvising when you're cooking in front of however many people are watching right now or might be watching in the future. But let's just go ahead and do it. Why not? Let's live dangerously. Put some extra biscuits on there. Trying to pick up the remaining pieces of jalapeno. Don't want those to go to waste. Okay, just spread them out a little bit so they're all equally spaced. Looks good to me.
How's everyone's looking? You have them on your trays yet? Yeah?
I think I got a B- worth of biscuits.
Those look good.
You take them out of the oven, they're going to be A+. Okay, time to put them in the oven. Hopefully your oven's up to the appropriate temperature, which is 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Pop them in. We're going to cook these for 12 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to put the timer on for 6 minutes. In 6 minutes, I'm going to switch them around and cook them for another 6 minutes. We're going for golden brown delicious on these. Now, you don't want to take them too brown because then they'll be a little burned on top. So they're going to end up being lighter than biscuits usually are, but that's okay. They're still going to be delicious. So let me set the timer before I forget to do that. Timer. Timer, 6 minutes. Start, there we go. Okay, while those are in the oven, I am going to take the about 1.5 tablespoons of butter that I had reserved from earlier, pop that in the microwave for about 30 seconds. So that will be all nice and melted by the time the biscuits come out of the oven. And I'm not scraping stuff onto the floor. I've got the bowl here, my mixing bowl below the counter, and I'm scraping it into that. I promise. Okay, well, now we've got 6 minutes and then another 6 minutes while the biscuits are cooking. So if you've got questions, now would be the time to ask them. While you're thinking of clever questions to ask. Hey, by the way, you want else, no questions about the trial brief, please. It's not what this meeting is about. But if you have questions about cooking, my wife will be happy to answer them. In the meantime, I can show you what we're having these biscuits with tonight. Because the missus has whipped up big pot of Irish stew, which doesn't have the potatoes in it yet, right? But gonna have a big pot of stew. Where's the camera? A big pot of stew tonight with those biscuits, and that is going to be some good eating, my friends. Okay, questions? Oh, look, some of my children on their own camera. How about that? How do you like these biscuits, children?
Would you say that baking is something that you do to help relax or try to maybe take time for yourself? Or is it kind of one of those things that you do it because you enjoy it, but it might stress you out a little bit?
Okay, so there are two aspects here. One is I bake because I like to eat. As you can tell from my overblown physique here, I like my carbs. I like my desserts. Trying to cut back on some of those is one of the reasons I don't bake so much. I like to try new recipes, and I especially like to eat desserts. And that is how I got into baking, and why I still do I would call the fancy baking in the family. As far as stress relief goes, I would say that the eating aspect is the stress relief part. And to get to the eating aspect, I've got to do the cooking aspect. So they kind of go hand in hand together. But I do find it, this current situation, which is highly, highly stressful, being the exception, usually baking is pretty relaxing.
You have a question. What are your top 3 favorite cookies to bake?
Okay, top 3 favorite cookies that I bake, or top 3 favorite cookies to eat? And really, it's going to be the same question. It's just I don't make them so much anymore.
I think you should answer both versions.
Okay, so my favorite cookie is the cherry chocolate chunk cookie from Cooks Illustrated or America's Test Kitchen. They both have, it's the same outfit, right? So that is my favorite cookie of all time. It makes a cookie. Oh, it's a giant cookie. It's about 6 or 7 inches across if you make it according to the recipe. And they are just fantastic. Dried cherries, big chunks of chocolate, and some nuts. Really fantastic cookie. My second favorite cookie after that is going to be the chocolate patch cookies, which are the ones that are mostly chocolatey, but then you roll them in powdered sugar. And then when they bake, they come out kind of a mottled black and white. Those are fantastic. And then my third favorite cookie is going to be a Murphy family favorite, which is going to be my mom's brownie recipe, which my wife has now mastered and perhaps even excelled my dear departed mother's ability to cook, because she makes some fantastic brownies. So those are going to be the top 3. And if that's, I don't care who's cooking, but if I were going to make cookies, I would probably make the chocolate cherry chunk cookies from America's Test Kitchen, because those are out of this world. Yeah.
Someone is asking if you can share your eclair recipe.
Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, eclairs are not a destination. Eclairs are a journey. And what one person thinks is a good eclair might not be what another person even thinks is actually an eclair. So I will be happy to share my eclair recipe. What I'll do is I'll share the video that I watch about this time every year to remind myself how to make it. Eclairs, the basic dough, the name of which I can't remember, but someone watching probably knows what it's called, is very easy to make.
A shoe? Is that what it is? A shoe?
Yes, a shoe. Thank you very much. CHOUX. Very easy to make, very difficult to master. And then there's the whole question of in what shape are you going to pipe your eclairs? Or are you just going to use a spoon and dribble the batter, the dough across the pan? So I've been experimenting a lot in the past several years. I only make eclairs like once or twice a year, so it's a very slow and long experiment. But we've gotten to the point where we're making the ridged eclairs that come out a little bit crispy from the oven, but are still quite tender. And then we're piping those full of creme anglaise, which is a very rich form of whipped cream with egg yolks in it. And then topping them off with about an 80% chocolate ganache. And they are quite tasty, but what I need to do is take a trip to France and have an actual French eclair and see, okay, am I even close to what they're making, or am I just making something that tastes good but is not actually an eclair? my timer is going off, so I'm going to give my pan of biscuits, which are, oh, they're looking good. I'm going to give them a 180-degree turn and reset the timer for another 6 minutes. But yeah, I will, I mean, I can't do it now because I have no idea where the recipe is, but I will be happy to share my my current eclair recipe. And I guess I'll send that to you, Harrison, and you can send it out to everybody who registered, or maybe tack it on to the Zoom link or something. I don't know. Other questions?
Can you give us a hot take on your favorite type of pie?
There's no question about that. My favorite type of pie is cherry pie. Not made with that nasty canned pie filling, but made with canned tart cherries. Now, I'd use fresh tart cherries, but they're almost impossible to find around here at any time of year, and certainly when it's not cherry season. But you can get the canned tart cherries packed in water, not syrup. The water is important because you don't want them to be too sweet. I like a nice tart pie. So pie is what I actually wanted to make for this presentation. But it just takes too long to make pie. You got to refrigerate the dough for at least an hour before you roll it out, and then it takes 45 minutes to bake the pie. And did you really want to have 3 hours of burning food with Professor Murphy? Probably not. So the biscuits were a compromise. But if we
and don't ever bring up store-bought pie crust with him. He will let you know you're wrong.
We are just about to get there, Allison. Yes, Allison was very wrong about the store-bought pie crust, which she suggested that I use as a short way to make pie in less than like 3 hours. And here's the thing, my friends, when you ask me what kind of pie is my favorite, it doesn't really matter what the filling is, though cherry is my favorite filling, because pie is about the dough. Pie is about the dough. If the pie dough is made correctly, you could just eat the pie dough baked by itself without anything else. And in fact, we have, because it's delicious. And my pies tend to be very heavy on the crust. I don't trim off much. I don't waste much. I just tuck it under so that you get a really thick pie crust because it's so good. And the pie dough recipe, in my opinion, the only pie dough that is worth making, and it's so easy. It's so easy. Is the Serious Eats. Kenji Lopez Alt, who is the main cook on Serious Eats, he has an easy pie dough recipe, which is just, it's fabulous. It's all butter, so none of that Crisco nonsense. He's actually the guy who came up with the vodka pie crust when he was working for Cooks Illustrated back, I don't know, 20 years ago. And I used that one for a long time, but the vodka gives it kind of an off taste sometimes, especially if you use cheap vodka like I do. But his recipes, easy pie dough, it's on SeriousEats.com. It is out of this world. It's so easy to make. It really is easy as pie, unlike so many pie dough recipes, where if you don't get it just right, you're going to have a super tough pie crust, and you're only putting in 4 tablespoons of water, so it's all crumbly and you can barely roll it out. This one, it's got plenty of water in it. It's all in the technique, and the technique is easy. The stuff rolls out like Play-Doh, and it always works. Always get a good pie. Am I right, family? Yeah. You guys, yes. See, they like my pie. So what kind of pie do I like? I like pie made with a good crust, and the best crust is Serious Eats Easy Pie Dough. Check it out. You won't be sorry, and you will amaze all of your friends. So we could go on for 3 hours about pie. That is my favorite thing to bake these days because, I kind of got the knack for it. Anyway, that pie dough, you can use it to make any kind of a pie, but I usually make a cherry pie. And I don't know, you guys could probably find a link to my Pie Day pie that I made in New Mexico on Google Photos, and maybe paste a link to that in the chat. Just so you have a little pie symbol cut into the top. It was very nice.
Professor, could you introduce your family real quick?
They're saying no. Like the live studio audience did not want to be on camera, but you guys have your camera on, or do you want to come over here? Okay, come over here then. All right, here, they're going to come over. Come on. Sorry, they're camera shy. I have 5 kids. The oldest is actually a freshman down in College Station. She's on the call, right? Hello, Emily.
Yes, hello.
Yes, that's the oldest. This is This is Katie. She's the youngest. This is the main cook, my lovely wife, Jean. This is my number 2 daughter, Julia. And come on, Bill. Come on over. Bill is actually the main biscuit maker in the family. He's been making biscuits for what? How old are you now? 14? Yeah. He's been making them since he was maybe 9 years old. And we actually, so his nickname when he was a kid was Bill Boy. We call him Bill Boy Biscuits because he's the one who perfected the recipe. It's true. And I've got one other daughter who's refusing to come over. Her name is Maggie. She's just, yeah, she's over there. Yeah, that's it. That's the fam.
Professor Murphy, I think there was one time in pre-pandemic life where you were going to make us cookies, but your wife made them instead. So thank you, Mrs. Murphy. They were really good
Yes.
for our class.
It was either my wife or my eldest daughter, because it was probably those chocolate patch cookies maybe that were rolled. Yeah. So they both make those cookies. I don't remember which one of them did that time. Yeah, I'm lazy these days.
You did get praise in the chat saying that you make a very good barbecue.
Oh, yes. Ha. Look, we could just have a show of me making stuff, or you know what? You don't want me to make stuff. I just talk about food because I could go on and on. Yes. So checking the biscuits. We've got the 6-minute timer going off here, and let's pull these out and look at it. Oh, these are looking done. Okay, let's stop that. So we'll hold these up to the overhead camera, which the color we're on is not so great. Maybe hold it up to the other camera. So yeah, these are just maybe a little bit underdone, but they're getting. Oh, these are perfect. So this is what we're going for in terms of brownness. See, not really that brown on the top, pretty good brown on the bottom. And just by picking it up, I can feel that this is a fluffy biscuit. This is going to be a good biscuit. This is the time when, if you really want to send these over the top and make them truly decadent, you get your melted butter that you reserved from earlier, and your pastry brush, or if you don't have a pastry brush, just use a spoon and dribble it on, and just brush that butter onto these biscuits. Anyway, barbecue, yes. I'm very, you thought I was particular about pie dough. Let's talk barbecue. Very particular about my barbecue. In my opinion, Texas barbecue is the only way. I mean, these are the other styles of barbecue that are delicious, but if I'm making barbecue, I want it to be Texas barbecue. And by Texas barbecue, I mean no seasonings on a brisket except salt and pepper. And all the other flavor comes from the wood smoke and from time, T-I-M-E, the length of time it takes to actually cook a brisket properly. And yeah, that's, you do it right. You don't really have to have really sophisticated stuff to make barbecue, sophisticated setup. End up with something really good. But that is a discussion for another show. So what we have here is we have some light, fluffy biscuits with, we've got some brown pieces of cheese there, and we've got some bits of jalapeno. And if they're actually quite hot, so this is kind of painful to do. But if we break it apart, we see, yeah, that is perfectly done. They're still quite moist on the inside, not dry and overbaked. And if we take a taste, well, it's so good with the jalapenos. The jalapenos are still crunchy. This is very hot. The pepper makes it nice and piquant. You guys, family, you want a biscuit? Well, they're hot because they're good. Come over and get a biscuit.
Go get one.
I'm warning you, they're hot, not spicy. They are that too, but mainly they're hot.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. That's it, my friends.
They're delicious.
They're so good.
How's everyone else's? I see some people taking bites. How do they taste? Thumbs up? Comments?
Oh yeah, thumbs up.
Awesome.
Chills.
Yeah, I've got a mouthful of biscuit. That never happens on actual cooking TV shows, so I don't know what they do. Pretend to eat, maybe, just pretend like they're taking a bite. Anyway, these are some good biscuits. Can't wait to pair them up with the stew. That's going to be a fabulous meal tonight. Now, generally, you want to eat these while they're hot. They're best fresh out of the oven as soon as they are cool enough for you to actually put them in your mouth, which does not take long. But you can reheat them. You put them back in the oven at 325 for maybe 5 minutes, and that will get them back up to nice and hot. Bill, did you get one? Do you need another one? No, okay. In the recipe that I put online, which by the way is sufficiently modified that I did not give any credit to the Pioneer woman because, hey, I've changed it and made it my own. You can look up hers and see that hers is actually quite different and not as good as mine. But you can actually make this dough ahead and put it in the refrigerator and then scoop your biscuits later. Or you can scoop the biscuits and then cover it up and put it in the fridge and then just go straight from the fridge into the oven. It might take an extra few minutes to cook them, but it's a very versatile, very easy dough. And it's a real crowd pleaser. I'm telling you, make these for your friends. You won't be able to get rid of them. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. That's we didn't burn any stuff, so it's not burning stuff with the professors. This is actually baking with professors. This has been a pleasure. And now that it's over, it's and it actually worked. I'm relieved and not nearly as stressed as I was 45 minutes ago. So, any questions before we say goodnight and eat the rest of these biscuits?
Can we get everyone to show their biscuit before we sign off so we can get a picture? And Allison, can you take that?
Yes. Yes, I will. Okay, once everyone's ready. Okay, let me see. I'm ready to take it.
Cheese.
Perfect, got it.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and especially thank you, Professor Murphy, for leading this. I thought this was so much fun. We will be having another one next month. So April 18th is going to be with Professor Pham, and she's going to be making a Vietnamese recipe. So keep an eye out. I'm going to be sending out the registration link with my April wellness calendar. And now you know that if you ever need pie advice, you know who to go to.
That is right. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been fun. So bon appetit. Enjoy those biscuits.
Thanks
See you around.
Thank you.